everyone, and welcome to A Balanced Life with Dr. Jacquie here at Black Star Network. As you know, and I say this every week, that this day is my favorite day of the week. Each and every week, we've been bringing you content and information that allows us to be able to share how important it is to find balance, especially in the African American community. And this week, as we are moving forward into summer, we're going to be talking about a series of dialogues and conversations that lead us into male mentoring. What does male mentoring look like? Who's involved in it? Who should stay out of it? And when is your voice supposed to be in the conversation? Today, we have a lineup of guests who will truly enlighten us and inspire us. So grab your pen, your pad, and possibly some tissues, because today is going to get real. We're joined today by Charlotte Avery, Dr. Tierney, Corey Briscoe, Pastor J.T. Johnson, Dondre Whitfield, and Chaz Jefferson. Welcome, everybody, to A Balanced Life.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. Wow. I am so thrilled that we are about to embark on this conversation today. I love that when we have everyone coming in, because I like for our audience to figure out where their access point may be. And so today we're going to be talking about male mentoring. And I'm just going to kind of do a round robin and find out from everyone before we get into some one-on-ones, what does male mentoring look like to you? And have you ever been engaged as a mentee or a mentor? Of course, I'm going to start with Corey Briscoe. Hey, Corey.
Thank you, Dr. J. I love this conversation. I think it's one that we need to have more of, specifically in the African American community. I have been on the mentee side, and I am now on the mentor side, and am still actively being mentored. And so for me, I'll come first from the mentee vantage point first. The reality is that when you think of being a mentee, I tell people there are still responsibilities to being mentored, right? And so I had to learn very quickly, it's my job to chase the mentor in some ways. You're thinking of people who have been successful and are working and stuff. And so I had to make sure that I was a priority. Of course, they have to make me a priority, but I had to make sure that I showed them that I desired it and I wanted it. And so that was something big that I learned. On the mentorship side, which I'm on right now, it's so interesting because we have such a new dichotomy of as people say, young folk. And the reality is trying to learn and understand them in a way where they have always had social media, they've always had cell phones, they've always had all of these things which make them think differently and act differently. And so even as a millennial myself, trying to connect with them has honestly been difficult because I've had to reconfigure how I think and understand their vantage point. And so for me, this mentoring this mentoring conversation is one about adjustment, honestly. And it's an adjustment for us in how we think and how we act and how we see ourselves in the mentee-mentor relationship, but also see what they want out of it. Because the reality is, I think it's easy for us to put on to people what we think they need. But I think, ground rules first. What do they want? Where are they trying to go? And what do they want from you? Because oftentimes there may be a very specific thing on the professional or personal side. And so I've had to establish boundaries and learn where I come in and where I add my voice, and then sometimes where I shouldn't add my voice. So I think that's what I would say is the perfect kickoff to this conversation.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Pastor JT.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I like how Corey called you Dr. J, so I think I'm gonna hold on to that. I'm gonna call you Dr. J until you tell me otherwise. But thank you for having me on this morning. I'm grateful to be here to talk about mentorship. I believe in mentorship. As Corey mentioned, I have experienced mentorship as being a mentee, as well as now being a mentor. And I actually take pride in both relationships. In being a mentee, being a child preacher, I started preaching when I was 9. And I was one of the ones that I was clingy to my pastor, to older preachers. And in some of those rooms, just being able to sit and listen, to be in a conversation where I'm 9 and I'm listening to someone that has been preaching longer than I have been alive. And I learned so much just by being in the room. And now being a part of the 100 Black Men, and our logo, or our motto, is what they see is what they'll be. And being true to the conversation of what we are tasked to talk about here on this particular show, I believe that one of the reasons why our African American community has not advanced in the way that we should is because sometimes those of success, we aren't as quick to show ourselves to those who need to see us. A lot of our young men specifically, they see rappers on a daily basis. They see athletes on a daily basis. But sometimes they don't get a chance to see that chemical engineer or civil engineer, or sometimes they don't get a chance to see that mathematician, or sometimes they don't get a chance to see that accountant. Sometimes they don't get a chance to see that plumber. And so they don't have a clear picture of what it looks like. And so mentorship, in my perspective, sometimes is not just the sitting down in a mentorship session. Sometimes it's mentoring simply by your actions. And I believe that will help us even in this conversation today, knowing that we have a responsibility as Black men to act the part, so our children won't have to look across the bridge or look across the fence looking for that male role model. They should be able to see one at arm's length.
Thank you for sharing that insight, because oftentimes there are many days where people just don't see individuals who we would consider qualified or worthy to be mentors and to engage our young men. And especially as this generation is getting older, I want to move for just a moment, because this gentleman's face will be new to most of you. This is the first time that Chaz Jefferson is joining us. And I would like for Chaz to speak on the same thing in the work that you're doing related to mentoring. And of course, later in our show, we will get into some deeper dives, but share with us your perspective of mentoring and how your organization assists.
Well, with the National Center for Urban Solutions, one of the things that we want to make sure that we provide to our youth is solutions for them. With our mentorship programs, a lot of the male students that come from our high school, the Academy for Urban Scholars High School, come from at least 85% of them come from single house parenthoods. So we know the importance of having important role models in their lives. From my perspective, being in this role over 6 years, director of our mentoring program, I once was a mentee and understand the benefits of, what a mentorship program can do for you. So many times, especially young Black males, they just don't have those people to connect with. And what we try to do is just expose them to different things and let them know there are different outlets out here to do positive things. So with our programming, we're trying to input education on them. We're trying to put them in internships, earn certifications, just so we can equip them with the tools after they graduate from our program in high school to be successful in society. And we understand mentorship and high qualified mentors, people that actually want to do the work. We have seen the benefits of that. We've seen a decrease in attendance going down in their behavior. We've seen an increase in their graduation or them participating in a lot of activity that they may have not done in the beginning of the year. And we believe, the crowd that we work with here in Central Ohio, it's a lot of youth that a lot of people don't want to work with, but we like to turn those stories into success stories.
Thank you for sharing that information. Now, before, this is for my audience who's viewing, get your fangirl out. Just go and get it out the way, because the next person that we're going to talk to is occupying this space in such a way that calls all of us to sit up and take notice. Dondre Whitfield, welcome, sir.
Dr. Jacquie, how are you? Thank you for having me.
I am delighted to have this conversation with you. And for now, can you share with us what your perspective of male mentoring should look like and what it is as you see it today? And then, of course, after our break, we'll come back and have a deeper dive.
Yeah, for me, really sort of attaching a hitch to what Pastor JT was talking about in terms of oftentimes we see mentorship as an active one-on-one with a particular person. And while I do that, even now as I was born and raised in Brooklyn, I live in Southern California now. I have actively begun to do work with students in Compton because I lived in Compton East. I grew up in Brooklyn at a time that it was very traumatic, very turbulent. And so we actively have to mentor. But as a young mentee, Muhammad Ali mentored me and didn't know it. Dr. King mentored me and didn't know it. Malcolm X was mentoring me and didn't know it. And so every single day, our job is to be the model that we want our brothers to ultimately mirror. You know, I often tell people that in my home, and my wife is no shrinking violet. She is from the South Side of Chicago, former actress, now a powerful director. But I am the leader of our home, not because I tell anybody what to do, because that's not going to work. But I show people what to do. Again, I am always modeling what everyone in the house, my children, even our pets, my wife included, I am modeling what everyone can mirror. So I think we need to look at mentorship from that side of it, from really being able to walk out so that people can look and see and go, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do, as opposed to some of the harmful things that I am doing.
Thank you for sharing that. Literally what he just highlighted is simple. More is caught than taught. When we come back after the break, I want to engage in a conversation that's rather substantive, because oftentimes we're not sure who can be a mentor. And oftentimes in our communities, we say, my mother, my grandmother, my auntie, but rarely do we hear my father, my uncle, my male cousin, when we're back after the break.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Welcome back, everybody, to A Balanced Life. And we're talking all things male mentoring. And honestly, it is a family affair. I would like to bring in Charlotte Avery and Dr. Tierney for just a moment, because they're married, have children, have mentored. But how you mentor your son is quite different than how you mentor your daughter. Charlotte and Dr. Tierney, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I want to bring us into this conversation because as women, oftentimes we don't fully understand what's happening under the surface or in the psyche of the men in our lives. We look at our cousins, our nephews, our grandparents and uncles. And Charlotte, you have 3 sons. And so when you think about mentoring for your male child, which is quite different than how you mentor your daughters, what is it you and Rod are looking for in a mentor? And I know Rod is always first mentor to your sons. And so share with us and our audience what that means to you as a mom and a wife.
Well, I have to tell you, being a mom of 7 children and raising, 3 of them, which are young, Black, impressionable boys, it means everything to me for them to not only have their dad, who is a wonderful mentor and role model, but also to be able to have other people in our circle or people who get added into our circle, whether they're coaches or teachers or other professional people who can actually sow into them and speak life into them and can sometimes be able to speak a word into them or plant a seed into them that my husband or myself might not be able to do because we are so close to them being their parents. So to be able to have leaders in our community who are really showing up, to have really strong Black men that really understand what it means to have character and integrity and honor and valor and chivalry, and being able to teach them principles that are just so important that will help them to be, not just good boys and good men right now, but will help them to be, good fathers, good, good husbands, and all of these different things in the world. And so, it really makes a difference. You know, I'm on a board for FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and I heard a speaker say, you know, when it comes to leadership, that you cannot separate leadership from character. You need to have both. And so to be able to have men, Black men, strong Black men who really understand what it means to truly lead, and that they can't separate their character from that leadership and how they show up in the world, it just means everything to me.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, you do mention something that's very important. Of course, the men who are watching, we recognize and identify that they serve in a lot of roles, you know, outside of being husbands, fathers, uncles, and cousins. As you mentioned, they are teachers, they are coaches, they are, you know, the barbershop workers. They're people who our children are in that space on an ongoing basis. And Dr. Tierney, when you consider the work that you do in coaching your clients and advising them, especially the men that you work with, how they level up, what does that look like in that male mentoring space, coming from a woman's perspective to reach men to say, you know, you just got to do better?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I had the benefit of being covered by some very strong men in my life, not just my daddy, but my grandfather, my uncles, you know, and to borrow what my brother Dondre said, they did not treat me like a shrinking violet. You know, they really mentored me and taught me, you know, everything from coming alongside the things that my mother and my grandmother was teaching me about being a lady, all the way down to knowing when a guy is running game, you know. And so being mentored and sitting at their feet, you know, helped me to better connect with the men in my life. It has helped me to better connect with my husband. And so when thinking about my clients, a lot of times my male clients will tell me that they really were hesitant in connecting with me or coaching with me because I am a woman, you know, but after they talked with me, they saw not only that I could understand and come alongside them, but that I'm also in a position where I recognize that I am a woman. So I'm constantly learning. We were talking, you know, right before the break about how I said, I have my pen, I have my pad, and I'm ready to learn because I'm always sitting in a seat where I want to know what's happening, you know, with my brothers. I want to know what's happening. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? Because that better equips me to love them more properly. It better equips me to be able to coach them, you know, properly. Now, even in saying that, we're more alike, men and women, than we are different. You know, sometimes we communicate and express differently, but trying to find those areas where we are alike, you know, and in terms of connecting with my clients, that is a thing that also makes me very effective in coaching my male clients to really hit their targets, hit their goals, and reach their next levels.
Thank you for sharing that, because honestly, it's that common ground where we are able to meet each other, to discover where's that balance in our communication, where's the balance in our relationship, where's the balance in our understanding. And oftentimes, I know ladies just gonna get mad at me, whatever. We lose our cool oftentimes when we don't clearly understand and identify where men are coming from. And the reason that we're having this conversation today is because we need to know whether or not the men in our lives have been mentored, who's been mentoring them, but also what type of guidance and direction are they receiving, so that we know how to latch on to that space. And that actually can become our access point to say, I know you've been hanging around so-and-so, they've been a positive influence in your life. And that gives us a little bit of a segue, if you will, to allow us to kind of step in to some places where we thought were too sensitive, you know, to talk about. And I'm excited when we come back after the break to have this conversation about how do women engage men and levels and layers of conversation that can actually lead to substantive growth for our community, when we're back after the break.
We welcome you to the launch of the Mass Poor People's Low Wage Assembly and Moral March on Washington, D.C., June 18, 2022.
We are a new, unsettling force, and we are powerful. New, unsettling force, and we are here.
We're rising up to demonstrate the compelling power that we, poor and low-income people, have to reconstruct society from the bottom up.
And we need to do it with the loudest voices possible, the biggest actions possible.
Because we know that there is no scarcity in this land. The only scarcity is the moral will to do what's right.
Hold on, just a little while longer.
We are those with sub-minimum wage jobs who can't afford sky-high rent.
People with disabilities are the fastest growing minority group.
It's crazy to me that in 2021, it's still legal for workplaces to pay a sub-minimum wage to people with disabilities.
There are still so much trial and tribulations that we go through as Indigenous people. We can't get a decent wage to sustain ourselves, nor can we get adequate housing.
Veterans across this nation say enough is enough. We can't pat essential workers on the back on one day and then cut their health care the next day.
Health is a political choice.
What more do I need to do to prove that my voice is just as valuable as anyone else's?
There are still forces in denial that would try to slow walk our transition to a clean economy and a just future for us all.
We have an immoral system run by immoral people.
But together we walk, and we walk and we fight.
It's time for a change. Reconstruyamos esta gran nación.
See, we are people of resilience. As we fight these interlocking injustices together,
when we work together, mobilize together, and rise together, we become a voice for the voiceless, and we become an agent of change in a time where great change is needed.
We need the third Reconstruction to ensure that deaf people, people with disabilities, and all people can have the right to live and to thrive.
We know what they are doing, but the question is, what are we going to do? Reconstruction begins when we change our mentality and say it's time for you to get your foot off of my neck.
Welcome back, everyone, from the break. As you can tell, this conversation is really highlighting and hitting for us some of those notes that are extremely important and valuable about how do we engage in male mentoring. Of course, women need mentoring too, and men play a very big part in how we as women learn and discover how to communicate with our men. That's our cousins, our uncles, our grandparents, our brothers. Sometimes we just don't get it right. And we're grateful to have this opportunity in this space to discover how to balance those levels and layers of communication in our relationship. I want to bring all of our guys back because I think that it's important right now that we really talk about how do men mentor men, and what does that relationship look like from the standpoint and the perspective of being transparent, vulnerable, and receiving the support that's needed in the society in which we live. Welcome back, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Hey, I am so thrilled that you all are here today to kind of enlighten us, because there are a few statistics that say that there are women who are raising more male children in a solo capacity than they are in a two-parent household. And so, Dondre, when you think about what that difference is in the mentoring capacity, how do you share and communicate the difference between a single parent household and a two-parent household? And this is for our caveat for our people. We do recognize that women are dying from cancer at alarming rates, and there are many men stepping into this solo parenting role. So how do we reach and guide and direct in this pathway of male mentoring?
Yeah, one of I would say the points that I made in my book, Male versus Man, that turned a lot of heads and now is beginning to make sense to people, really resonating, is that a woman can't teach you how to be something that she's not. And originally that got people their backs up because our sisters, because some of our brothers have abandoned their posts for one reason or another, and there are a myriad of reasons. But when a woman is left to raise a son on her own, she has been made to feel like she is mother and father. And the truth of the matter is that the best that she can do is be a dynamic mother. She can't be a father. You don't have to be fathered by your biological, but you do have to be fathered, right? So I have a 17-year-old daughter, and I'm a very knowledgeable man, but I cannot teach my daughter how to be a woman. Why? Because I'm not one. That is my wife's job. If my wife weren't in my life, I'd say, Dr. Jacquie, I'm dropping Parker off to you from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Monday. Do what you do. And then I come and pick her up, and I'm going to do it again on the weekend. And I'm going to keep doing it until you say, I can't do it anymore. Why? Because, again, I can't teach her how to be something I am not. What I can do is I can teach her how to have language for a man. I can teach her how to identify a man. In my book, I talk about how males look to be served while men look to be of service. So there is a dynamic difference between every single brother that you see walking down the street. Simply because he has a penis and pecs doesn't make him a man. That makes him a male, but what makes him a man is his understanding that he should be dedicated to being of service. I tell my sisters all the time, look, when you're going out on a date with a guy, the two questions that you should be asking is, who taught you how to love and who taught you how to be a man? Manhood or becoming a man doesn't come with a magical age. You don't automatically turn into a man because you turn 18 or 21 or 25, like car companies think. You turn into a man by being given information, instruction, and being held to account. That is why us as men, we are so critical in the formation of manhood in our young brothers. So our single moms really have to become partnered with a man in order for him to begin to guide that young male to help him matriculate into manhood.
Okay, so you missed the whole mouth drop. And so I want to pick up on something that you said, the formation of manhood. At what age does the formation of manhood begin? Because I know in our society, we baby our kids for too long. So please unpack that for us.
I'm so glad that you asked me that question. I'm actually getting goosebumps right now because I have heard this question over and over again from our sisters, the moms who are raising their sons, and they say, well, when can I start? I said, well, it's very, very simple. What age did you begin putting a ball in your son's hand? Okay, so once he started walking, once he started communicating, even sometimes before he could communicate, you put a ball in his hand. Well, why is it that you would put a ball in his hand hoping that maybe you might turn him into the next Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, or Michael Jordan, but you won't invest the same energy and effort into making him the greatest version of himself that is a man? So begin reading to him at the earliest of ages what manhood looks like. Begin having conversation at the earliest of ages what manhood looks like. My son, who is 13 years old, and my hand to God, if my son was standing here right now and you asked him, you said, Dre, why are you here? Why did God put you on this earth? My son would tell you to be of service. Why would he tell you that? Because every single day I am his drill instructor for what manhood looks like. And every single day I hold my son accountable for walking out what manhood looks like. And I got to be honest with you. I talked about my wife earlier, and I say this with all due respect. And my wife, if she was sitting here right now, she would tell you there are times when my wife stands in the way of my work. Why? Not because she means it in a bad way, but she is the ultimate nurturer. So when she sees my son in the pain of going through what she has to go through. It's one of the reasons why they don't allow moms in boot camp. Why? Because they're trying to make your son a soldier. And that process is painful. And when a mom watches her son turn into a soldier, she will tap out for him. Meanwhile, he will not be ready for the battles that are ahead. So sometimes I have to tell my wife with love, babe, not now. I need you to move aside so that I can turn my son into the spiritual soldier he needs to become in order to be the man that God has called him to be.
And ladies and gentlemen, this is why we're having that conversation. If you cannot, y'all know I'm going to say it, if you cannot say amen, just say ouch and step on out the way. Pastor JT, bringing men into this responsibility, accountability that is required of them. How do you, as pastor, leader, teacher, father, engage others and being able to step back so that God can have his way?
Wow. Dr. J, I should have went first. I think Bishop Dondre just kind of just wiped out everything. I'm over here just speechless myself. But to be perfectly honest with you, and brother, I echo you, and to our listeners, what you just heard there was like so rich. I don't even think that we could kind of conceptualize what we just heard. And I believe that that's the blueprint of us shifting this next generation. And to piggyback off of what he said and to answer your question, I believe it's being relationally intentional. One thing that I have identified with men is that men are guarded. Especially when you think about African-American men, we are not taught to feel. We're not taught to express our feelings. And even when we are in a home with another man, to DeAndre's point, we are to be strong. We are to be that server. So when another man engages another man, they are immediately in a place of defense rather than in a place of reception. So I believe the statement that I gave, or the phrase that I gave first, is being intentionally relational, is because there's no way that I can mentor you if I don't have a relationship with you. And that's one of the things that I believe that has affected our generation, especially this one, in a negative way, because I was reading last week in a article that was produced in the for the Stanford Graduate School of Education. Only 2% of teachers are Black men in America. I want you to think about that. Only 2% of teachers in America are Black men. And our children go to school every day. Yet in our schools, they have police. The ISD police are in the schools. So our young men are having an interaction with an authoritative person first, before they have one with an instructional person. So if I am first privy to someone that is telling me what to do from an authoritative standpoint, it makes it hard for me to receive that what to do from somebody that is trying to instruct me. So I believe that we have to first break the barrier down of building relationships. So when that relationship is built from man to man, then it's easy for Moses to be able to have a relationship with Joshua. But then in this generation too, we have to check some Moses, because we have some Moses in this generation that's jealous of Joshua. So then there is a dichotomy that has to happen. There is a relationship that has to be built where Joshua feels confident enough to be vulnerable in front of Moses. And then Moses has to be vulnerable enough for Joshua to know that he's passing on his wealth of knowledge to Joshua. And I believe that if we ever get to that understanding, that we would, as a African-American community, especially a community of men, we will be at a point where we're passing the baton, because I believe that it's too late in the game now for us to still be saying, well, you have to get it. I had to work for it. You have to prove yourself. I think at this point, as men, we should be empowering the next generation to pick up where we left off and not continue to be at the starting point, because we as a whole, we started off in the back. So if we are in 2022 and we are not empowering this next generation to run and pick up where we left off, we are setting up ourselves to be even further back over the next 20 to 40 years.
Thank you for sharing that information. I know our audience is taking good notes, and I know that they are consistently typing in the chat and sharing all this information. And we love this level of engagement because it gives us as an opportunity to really figure out what matters most as we're talking about how do we mentor the males in our community. Now, let's just be clear. Mentoring males is not just at 13, 14, 15, and then we're done with you when you go to college. No, mentoring starts in preschool or beyond or earlier, but then it also goes beyond that when you're college age, after you graduate from college. Whether you choose to go to college or not, you're never beyond being mentored, whether it's from a personal perspective, a relational perspective, or a career perspective. When we come back after the break, I want to engage Chaz and Corey in a conversation related to how do men mentor men professionally when we're back after the break.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Welcome back, everyone. I know you're still sitting there saying, oh my God, did we all just hear what we heard? And yes, we did, because these are the levels of conversations that we have in the beauty shop, in the barber shop, or, in the nail salon, the things we're doing when we're, having cookouts in the backyard or at the nail salon, wherever it is that we find ourselves, we are having these levels of conversation. So I hope that we are opening up avenues for dialogue with you to be able to engage with your loved ones, your family, and your friends about what really matters when it comes to getting mentoring or being a mentor to our males. Corey and Chaz, I'd like to engage you now in this conversation related to professional mentoring. Chaz, when you think about the work that you do, why is it that you do the work that you do? And at what age do you continue to mentor men within your organization?
As far as men that want to become mentees?
Yeah, if there are men that want to become mentees, but then also those that are needing mentoring, where do those ages stop and start? And how do you prepare them for the process?
Well, from a mentor perspective, when we're recruiting our mentors for our young mentees, we like to host different sessions. And once we collect those mentees who are participating in our program, then we're meeting with them on a almost monthly basis, because we want to see what's working, what's not working, what are some challenges that they're facing, how we can help them. But one of the main things that's very, very important when you're trying to teach men how to become mentors, especially with the youth today, is, they want some honesty. They want people who are, going to be in their lives and going to be real and really expose them to different things. I think before you can get to mentoring, or it's just like when it's in school, before you can do schoolwork, you got to get to know that kid. You got to get to know who you're actually dealing with, because youth today, they'll be able to, sniff those things out. Like I said, we work with, almost over 80% of our young men come from fatherless homes, and, they're used to people coming in and out of their life. So, the things, if we can connect with them on a spiritual level, whatever level that is, we got to make sure that our engagement is correct first. You start from that standpoint, then you can get into the mentoring and the activities and seeing the different things that they want to do. Just an out of box approach in regards to trying to stay connected with them. That's one of the things we try to pride ourselves on. It's very time consuming. So the men that we do work with, sometimes they are volunteering, and they got to be willing, to really, really be in these young men's lives because they need it. So from a commitment standpoint, those are some of the things that we're trying to cover when meeting with mentees, when recruiting new mentors. Those are the questions and things that we try to keep in mind when we're trying to pair someone with our mentees and want to bring them into our program to work with our young men.
Thank you for sharing that. Those relationships that are built male to male, that bonding is important because, as Chaz just said, there are times that these young men come from homes where there is no father, and in their community, oftentimes there are no father figure. Now, most of us are no stranger to statistics of violence, the number of men that are serving in the military, the number of men that are incarcerated, the number of men who have gone on to glory. So therefore, there is a shortage of men being able to pour into the lives of these young men. However, when I think about Corey Briscoe and the work that he does, community, both relationally from the church and also professionally, Corey, how is it that you are mentoring others, and why do you see value from a professional perspective in mentoring? What does that offer the life of a young person?
I just want to start with saying that the gentlemen are absolutely killing it. This could be a 4-week conversation. It is absolutely amazing. I think the first thing when we think about male mentorship is we have to understand the landscape of our country first and our communities. And when we look at U.S. Census data, right, the U.S. Census tells us that over 22 million children come up in single family households. And then when you think of African American males and you think of how they have grown up, whether urban environments or not, the first thing you have to do is level set. And I think it's one of the biggest issues why national programs aren't effective to our Black males is that they don't speak to us, they don't talk to us, right? Effective mentoring, it has trust, it has empathy, it has relationship building that allows me to see myself or allows me to understand my current predicament in a way that I can trust you, I can be honest with you, I can confide in you. And I think that's the hallmark of, and the first pillar of starting male mentorship. When I look at the work that I do with men across the country, we've got to have honest conversations about trauma and exposure to violence. We have to have real conversation about where people are and where they're not. Because how can I deal with professional, Corey, and professional development where I want to go when I still am dealing with mental trauma and trauma in my communities, and I'm looking at the landscape of what's going on, and I'm still trying to figure out my own survival. So you talk about the landscape of developing people, right? The first thing I deal with is trying to identify where they are in a sense of belonging, right? Let's understand, do they have the cultural groups? When I look at myself, right, I grew up in predominantly, white high schools and white learning academies where I was one of many. It was just me. And it was many students, but I was the only one that looked like me. And when you have those conversations, right, you have to first understand where a person comes in, understanding even their ethnic identity, how they see themselves in the greater picture. It wasn't until going to Howard University where I fully understood my own ethnic identity and then could then understand the impact of who I was to even garner a professional understanding of where I could be. And so I think these conversations have to come from a different lens, and we have to create models of mentorship that set standards, that build up young men in a way that make them feel like they can see themselves.
Wow. So, listening to the conversation and the dialogue that we're having right now, we talk about, oh my goodness, I need to take a pause for a moment because this is going to be one of those questions that's going to be loaded in a sense that, Corey, you mentioned the ability to have trust, to be transparent, to, take the opportunity to deal with our trauma. But oftentimes the level of confidence that men bring to that space, the level of competence that comes out of what we need, when moms, because that's typically who's making these decisions, are trying to figure out how to navigate the landscape. I want to bring everybody back in for a second, because navigating the landscape can oftentimes lead to landmines. And I want to talk to that for a moment because I want our audience to be clear that we serve as a resource. We're here to guide, direct, prepare, engage, and lead you to finding what's necessary for you. But we recognize that you can be triggered at any moment by anything. Charlotte Avery.
I definitely watch as well as pray, because I know that, everybody is not a perfect fit for my sons. And, all three of my sons, they have a different bent. And so, you know, what one of my sons needs, another one might not need. But what I really am very watchful and prayerful, because I want my sons to be mentored by men who are fully invested in who they are going to become, that they really understand the seeds that they're planting in our children, in my boys, because I want them to be mentored by men who will pray for them and not pray on them. Because, you know, that's a really big deal, you know, and as a mom, you know, I'm always very watchful and prayerful to make sure that, you know what, if even if my sons like go out with another male that's not their father, like I'm always on guard, like waiting for them to tell me all things that happen, because, you know, I have a very honest and open relationship with my children. So if, you know, I missed the mark on somebody that I thought was that I wanted to mentor, or my husband may have wanted to mentor our boys, you know, I go back, I correct it. And then, you know, I just watch them, as well as pray, you know, for a different person who can really speak into their lives and, you know, and where they're going to, and how they're shaping them.
Thank you for mentioning the word shape, because that's going to be my question for Pastor JT. When we think about men shaping men, now women, we can't identify with this, so y'all just kind of sit back, listen, and learn. When we think about men shaping men, men have a certain criteria of what they believe a Black man should look like to be civilly engaged, to be good parents, to be good fathers, to be good men, to be all those things that women look for in the quality of a man. Help us understand how to look for that, you know, when we're seeking out these things for guidance and direction.
Wow. So I'll be honest with you. Dondre gave us two important questions that I believe I would agree with that sisters should ask. Who taught you how to be a man, and who taught you how to love? But to be perfectly honest with you, I believe that there has to be a level of self-awareness if we're talking about a sister looking for that man. Mm-hmm. Because to be perfectly honest with you, and I'm a pastor, so I have to go back to the book that I preach from. It said the man that finds a wife finds a good thing. And so our culture prepares a woman to be a wife, while a man just stumbles along in life, just grasping and learning along the way. So little girls, I have 8 beautiful nieces. I have 2 young men that are my sons, but I have 8 beautiful nieces, and all of them have dolls. All of them. My baby niece Baylor, she loves to cook, but she loves to use her easy bake oven. So she's being taught the aspects of being a wife. But my boys, they want to play games. They want to play Call of Duty. They want to shoot guns. They want to use Tonka trucks. So you have men who want to buy guns and buy cars, and you have young girls that are growing up to be the nurturer that Dondre talked about. So that young woman, when she is looking for a man to be her husband, I believe the first thing that she needs to do is be so aware of herself and aware of her relationship with God that she hides herself in God. So then when that man finds God, God will direct him to who has been hidden. And then when that union is brought together, that will be one that no man can put asunder.
Thank you for sharing that information. Now, we have to go to a break, and we're going to end the show. But I'm going to do something I've not done before. When we come back after the break, I want everybody to identify and understand just how serious we are about the work that we are doing and how male mentoring is going to be moving forward. So this will be all of June. We're talking about men and male mentoring, and we're going to get ourselves together as a community. When we come back after the break, I'm asking Dondre to give our reflection when we're back after the break.
10 in here?
10, and you don't come out till you die. And you eat him, you poop him.
Oh my God.
So
Welcome back, everybody, to A Balanced Life. And as you can tell, our mouths have dropped. We've cried a few tears. We've shared a few laughs. And we're really in awe and in amazement about how we move our community forward. So I've asked Dondre Whitfield to give our closing reflections for our show. Dondre.
As I reflect on my own biological father, who passed away last year, and my father and I were estranged from each other for 20 years. My father had gone to prison for 13 years for manslaughter. He had gotten locked up when I was 13 years old. When he got out, I was 26. When I found out that he was out, based on experiencing all of the abandonment and abuse by him when I was an adolescent, at 26 years old, I was not the version of a man that I am now. I was a man, but I had male-like tendencies. And so the street taught me that when you get hurt, you are allowed to hurt again, or hurt the person who hurt you. Hence the term hurt people hurt people. And so I drove back into Brooklyn, found my father, and I picked him up in my expensive car because I wanted to show him what I had made of myself without him. And just before I kicked him out of my car, I told him if I ever saw him again, that I would kill him. It wasn't until I was 46 years old where my 11-year-old daughter came and sat down next to me. No segue. She said, "Dad, do you know where your father is?" And I knew that God had sent me a messenger that I couldn't shoo away. Coming into my own manhood was extremely challenging because I did not have a model that I could mirror. And so every single day when I do the work that I do it in honor of my father, who would have become a great man sooner than when he found Islam in prison. I honor my best friend who I lost in a motorcycle accident because rather than look after my friend, I decided to entertain myself and abandon looking after him. So when a man abandons his post, I lost my best friend that day because he followed me in folly. My daughter is named after him. And so every day I look at my daughter, every day I call her name, I think of my friend that I lost in abandoning my post. So every day that I help males matriculate into manhood, I honor my father. I honor my best friend. Our sisters, while we were doing this show, in our chat, were talking about how much we had poured into them, how much they learned, and they were affirming us. And I thank them because as men, we need to hear, we are quick to hear our sisters when they are critical of our behavior, but we need to be as quick to hear from them when we hit the mark. We need to build our community in having our sisters speak that kind of affirmation into us when we are diligent about putting in the sweat equity that builds our community. And we need to hear from our brothers and love on ourselves we hear about all of this stuff that happens in our community. We're heard about Buffalo. We haven't spoken about that, and yet every single one of us are carrying the residual effect that comes from that. So we have to be able to pull together and build each other as we build our young brothers and sisters. So with all of that being said, mentoring is a gigantic pulling together of resources and love, and that we have to be able to do that together if we're going to build each other. So I'm just so thankful to have this conversation. Dr. Jacquie, thank you for bringing us all together. And I feel like a part 2 is waiting from this conversation.
Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you all for watching. Stay tuned for part 2 of this conversation. Bye now.